Lyric Hayes stood at the altar in her $15,000 wedding dress, her hand wrapped around a small remote control hidden inside her bouquet. 120 guests sat before her in the glass, enclosed Phipps Conservatory, bathing in golden afternoon light. Her fiancé, Bennett Cross, billionaire, philanthropist, Pittsburgh's most eligible bachelor, smiled at her with relief in his blue eyes. He thought he'd gotten away with it. In the front row, Lyric's mother, Diane Hayes, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, playing the role of proud mother. She thought she'd survived her worst mistake. They were both wrong. "Actually, Pastor Williams," Lyric said, her voice clear and steady through the microphone clipped to her dress, "before we go any further, I need to say something." She turned away from Bennett to face the crowd. Every eye locked onto her. "Thank you all for coming today to what you thought was going to be my wedding." Confused murmurs rippled through the conservatory. Lyric pulled the remote from her bouquet and pressed a button. Behind her, the massive screen that had been set up to display the ceremony flickered to life. But instead of showing the happy couple, it showed something else entirely: high-definition footage of a bedroom, her bedroom. And in that bed were two people who should never have been there together. Her fiancé, her mother, 18 hours ago. The gasps were immediate. Someone screamed. Diane jumped to her feet. "Turn it off," her mother shouted. "Lyric, please." "Sit down, Mother," Lyric said, her voice cold as winter. "You wanted to be part of this wedding so badly. You're going to stay for the whole thing. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you forgot to protect yourself? Have you ever been betrayed by the two people who should have loved you the most? The man who promised you forever and the woman who gave you life." Lyric had, for 3 months, her billionaire fiancé and her own mother had been carrying on an affair, in her bed, in her apartment, while she planned a wedding that was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. But what Lyric did next, what she did in that conservatory in front of investors, society reporters, and everyone who mattered in Bennett Cross's carefully constructed world, it was savage. It cost them millions. It destroyed their reputations. It went viral. And it proved one undeniable truth: when you betray a woman who knows how to play the long game, she won't just walk away quietly. Welcome to Mr. Roman's Story Vault, where we bring you real stories about real consequences. If you're new here, you've just entered a community that believes in accountability, not just forgiveness. We don't shy away from the messy, complicated truth about what happens when trust is shattered and justice is demanded. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this story has twists you won't believe. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done if you found your mother in bed with your fiancé the day before your wedding? This is Lyric's story. And to understand how she got to that altar with revenge in her heart and evidence in her hand, you need to know where she started. Lyric Hayes grew up in Pittsburgh's Homewood neighborhood, where hope was a luxury most people couldn't afford. The streets were lined with row houses that had seen better decades, corner stores with bulletproof glass, and children who learned too young that dreams were for people born in different zip codes. Her earliest memory was of her mother, Diane, getting ready for a date. Lyric must have been 4 years old, sitting on the bathroom floor while Diane applied makeup in the mirror. Her mother was stunning, smooth, dark skin, curves that made men stumble over their words, and a smile that could convince anyone of anything. "Baby, Mummy's going out tonight," Diane had said, smacking her lips to spread the red lipstick evenly. "Miss Patricia from next door is going to watch you. When are you coming back?" Lyric had asked. "When I'm done." That became the pattern. Diane was always getting ready for someone, coming back from someone, or on the phone with someone. Men cycled through their small apartment like seasons, each one promising to take care of them, to be different from the last, to finally give Diane the life she deserved. Each one eventually left, and Diane would be heartbroken for exactly 2 weeks before the next one appeared. Lyric's father had been the first to leave. She was 3 years old when he decided fatherhood wasn't for him. He left behind a faded photograph and child support checks that arrived sporadically, usually late, sometimes not at all. Diane kept the photograph in a drawer, and on particularly bitter nights, She'd pull it out and tell Lyric, "Your daddy was a beautiful liar. Don't ever trust a beautiful liar." The irony of that advice, coming from a woman who fell for beautiful liars every 6 months, wasn't lost on Lyric even as a child. School became Lyric's refuge. She was bright, hungry for knowledge, desperate to prove that her circumstances didn't define her ceiling. Her teachers noticed. Mrs. Chen, her 5th grade teacher, stayed after school to tutor her. Mr. Rodriguez, her high school counselor, helped her apply for scholarships. They saw what Diane was too distracted to notice. Lyric was exceptional. But exceptional didn't pay the bills. By 16, Lyric was working at a grocery store, stocking shelves after school and on weekends. The money went toward things Diane forgot: school supplies, winter coats that actually fit, the electric bill when another boyfriend's promises evaporated. She got into Penn State on a partial scholarship. The rest she cobbled together through 3 jobs: campus library during the day, waitressing at night, and cleaning offices on weekends. She slept 4 hours a night if she was lucky. She ate ramen noodles and day-old bakery discounts. She missed parties and football games, and everything that was supposed to make college memorable. But she graduated. Business degree, magna cum laude, with exactly $847 in her bank account, and a determination that burned hotter than exhaustion. Lyric started Authentic Voice in a shared office space in East Liberty, armed with a laptop, a phone, and an understanding of struggle that her competitors couldn't replicate. Her business model was simple: help minority-owned businesses tell their stories in a marketplace that often ignored them. She understood their challenges because she'd lived them. She knew how to make their voices heard because she'd had to fight to make her own heard. The first year, she barely broke even. The second year, she hired her first employee. By year 5, Authentic Voice had 12 employees and a client list that included some of Pittsburgh's most promising startups. At 32, Lyric had built something her younger self wouldn't have believed possible. She had a business, a reputation, a beautiful apartment in Shadyside with high ceilings and hardwood floors. She had security. What she didn't have was love. Real love. The kind that didn't come with conditions or expiration dates. She'd dated, of course. There was Marcus in college, who cheated with her roommate. There was David, the consultant who wanted her to straighten her natural hair for his company events. There was Jonathan, who loved the idea of dating a black entrepreneur, but got uncomfortable when she made more money than him. And there had been 2 white men, who pursued her like she was a box to check on their progressive bingo cards. She'd been someone's first black girlfriend twice, and both times ended the same way, with her teaching grown men about their biases while her own heart became collateral damage. So when Bennett Cross walked into her life, Lyric's expectations were underground. She'd learned that love was supposed to be pure, but life had taught her it usually wasn't. She'd learned to protect herself, to keep her standards high and her guard higher. What she hadn't learned was that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who know exactly how to make you lower that guard. The conference room at Cross Industries was all glass and steel, perched on the 32nd floor of the tallest building in downtown Pittsburgh. Lyric walked in on a Tuesday morning in March with her presentation polished and her expectations low. She was there to pitch a rebranding strategy for Cross Industries' community outreach program. The company, a renewable energy conglomerate worth billions, wanted to improve its image in the neighborhoods it claimed to serve. Lyric had researched their previous efforts: performative charity events, check presentations, with oversized novelty checks, tax write-offs disguised as generosity. She expected this meeting to be more of the same, rich people wanting to look good without actually changing anything. Bennett Cross was already seated when she arrived, 38 years old, tall, with sandy brown hair that looked expensively casual. He wore a navy suit without a tie, and when he stood to shake her hand, his grip was firm but not aggressive. Ms. Hayes. Thank you for coming. I've read your proposal 3 times. It's the most honest assessment of our failures I've ever seen. Lyric blinked. Most potential clients don't appreciate being told they're failing. Most potential clients are more interested in appearances than results. He gestured to a seat. Please, I want to hear everything. She presented for 45 minutes. She didn't soften her language or downplay their mistakes. She showed them exactly how their community programs were received in the actual community, with skepticism and exhaustion. People in Homewood, in Larimer, in the Hill don't need another basketball. Caught with your logo on it, Lyric said, clicking to her final slide. They need job training programs that lead to actual jobs at your company. They need you to hire locally, pay fairly, and invest in the infrastructure that poverty has destroyed. Everyone wants to give people fish. You need to restructure who owns the pond. Silence filled the room. The other executives looked uncomfortable. Lyric gathered her materials, already mentally writing off this contract. That's revolutionary, Bennett said, leaning forward. That's just fair, Lyric corrected him. He smiled, genuine, reaching his eyes. Same thing, depending on where you're standing. The meeting ran 2 hours past its scheduled time. Bennett asked questions that showed he'd actually listened. He challenged her assumptions, not dismissively, but curiously. He wanted to know how to do better, not how to look like he was doing better. Lyric got the contract. $50,000 for a 6-month consultation. It was the biggest deal Authentic Voice had ever landed. 3 weeks later, Bennett called her personal cell phone. How did you get this number? Lyric asked. Your website lists it as the contact for new business inquiries. This isn't a business call, is it? No, Bennett admitted. I'd like to take you to dinner, somewhere expensive and French where I can impress you with wine knowledge. I definitely Googled beforehand. Lyric laughed despite herself. That's quite an offer. Is that a yes? She hesitated. Every instinct told her to say no. She'd been down this road before. The fascination, the curiosity, the inevitable moment. When she became a story, a white man told at parties about his woke phase. But something in Bennett's voice sounded different. Less performative. More nervous. Let me suggest an alternative, Lyric said. There's an Ethiopian restaurant in East Liberty. Best food in the city. If you're willing to let me order for both of us and learn something instead of impressing me, I'll consider it. Bennett agreed immediately. The restaurant, Abyssinia, was small and family-owned, with colorful woven, baskets on the walls, and the rich smell of Berberi spices in the air. Bennett arrived exactly on time, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt, looking more relaxed than he had in his office. Lyric ordered Doro Wat, Kitfo, and several vegetable dishes, all served on a large platter lined with injera bread. She watched Bennett fumble adorably with the spongy bread, trying to scoop the stews the way she showed him. This is incredible, he said, attempting to tear the injera properly. I can't believe I've lived in Pittsburgh my whole life and never came here. You probably stuck to the Strip District in Lawrenceville, Lyric said. Guilty. He took a drink of water. Tell me about growing up here. In the neighborhoods, Cross Industries has been failing. She appreciated that he named it directly. The failure, the disconnect. So she told him about Homewood, about her mother's rotating door of relationships, about working 3 jobs through Penn State, about building Authentic Voice from nothing. Bennett listened without interrupting, without trying to relate his own struggles, without the usual discomfort white people showed when confronted with poverty they'd never experienced. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. I grew up in Connecticut, he finally said. Old money. The kind where your trust fund has a trust fund. I went to boarding school, Yale, got handed a VP position at my father's company before I'd earned it. Sounds hard, Lyric said, her tone dry. It wasn't. That's the point. He met her eyes. I had every advantage. I'm not going to sit here and pretend loneliness in a mansion is the same as not knowing if you'll make rent. But I am going to be honest about my own stuff. My sister, Margot, struggled with addiction because nothing in her life ever felt real. Everything was cushioned, managed, solved with money. She almost died twice before she got sober. Is she okay now? 3 years clean, working as a counselor for other addicts. Pride filled his voice. She's the bravest person I know. They talked until the restaurant closed, about wealth and poverty, about privilege and responsibility, about the different kinds of loneliness that money either creates or solves. Bennett didn't try to equate his struggles with hers, and Lyric appreciated that more than he could know. When he drove her home, he drove a Tesla, because of course he did. He walked her to her door, but didn't expect to be invited in. "I'd like to see you again," Bennett said. "If you're willing." "Why me?" Lyric asked. "Be honest. Because you're brilliant. Because you don't need me to save you. Because you called me out on my company's failures and made me want to actually fix them, instead of just looking like I was fixing them." He paused. "Because when you laugh, it's real. And I'm tired of things that aren't real." Lyric studied his face in the porch light, looking for performance, for fetishization, for all the red flags she'd learned to spot. What she saw was honesty, or at least what looked like it. "Okay," she said, "let's see where this goes." Over the next 6 months, Lyric and Bennett built something that felt solid in ways her previous relationships never had. He showed up. That was the first thing she noticed. When he said he'd call at 7, he called at 7. When he promised to attend her company's anniversary event, he arrived, early and stayed late, genuinely interested in meeting her employees. When she mentioned loving a particular author, a signed first edition appeared on her doorstep the next week, not as a showy gesture but because he'd been listening. Their second date was a Penguins game. Their third was the Carnegie Museum of Art. Their fourth was cooking dinner together in her apartment, where Bennett admitted he'd never actually cooked anything more complicated than scrambled eggs. "How have you survived?" Lyric asked, watching him struggle to chop an onion. "Private chefs, restaurants, takeout." He wiped his eyes, which were watering from the onion. "This is humiliating. This is hilarious," Lyric corrected, taking the knife from him. "Watch and learn." She taught him to make her grandmother's jerk chicken recipe. He paid attention, asked questions, and didn't act like his incompetence was charming. He genuinely wanted to learn. The physical intimacy grew naturally. Their first kiss was after that cooking date, with Lyric tasting like rum and Bennett smelling like Scotch bonnet peppers. It was sweet and unhurried, full of promise. Their first night together happened 6 weeks into dating. Bennett was attentive in ways that surprised her, checking in, asking what felt good, paying attention to her responses instead of following some script. Afterwards, he didn't immediately roll over and fall asleep. He held her, traced patterns on her shoulder, and asked about the scar on her knee from a childhood bicycle accident. "You're different," Lyric said into the darkness. "Different how?" "You act like my pleasure matters as much as yours." "Of course it does," Bennett said, sounding genuinely confused. "Why wouldn't it?" She didn't explain that not everyone saw it that way. Instead, she kissed him again. The moments that convinced her he was different accumulated like evidence. When her mother called needing money for the 3rd time in 1 month, Bennett didn't offer to pay. He offered to listen while Lyric vented her frustration. When she landed her biggest client, a national retail chain that wanted her to consult on their diversity initiative, Bennett threw her a surprise celebration dinner. He'd invited her entire staff, her best friend Zara, and made a toast that centered her accomplishment without making it about him. When his father made a casually racist comment at a family dinner about those neighborhoods, Bennett called him out immediately. "Dad, that's not acceptable. Apologize to Lyric, or we're leaving." Richard Cross had apologized, though his discomfort was obvious. Bennett drove Lyric home early anyway. "You didn't have to do that," she'd said in the car. "Yes, I did. I won't let anyone disrespect you, not even my father." She'd fallen a little bit in love with him in that moment. By their 6-month anniversary, Lyric had let her guard down in ways she'd sworn she never would again. She kept a toothbrush at his penthouse. He had a drawer at her apartment. They'd met each other's friends, navigated their first argument about whether it was appropriate for him to donate to her. Business, she'd said, absolutely not, he'd respected it, and started using the word we when talking about the future. On a warm September evening, Bennett took her back to Abyssinia, the Ethiopian restaurant where they'd had their first date. The same table, the same waiter, even some of the same dishes. "This is where it started," Bennett said, after they'd finished eating. "Good memory," Lyric said. "Lyric." He reached across the table, taking her hand. His palm was sweating. "You've transformed my entire understanding of what love can be. You've made me want to be better, do better, give more. You've challenged me and supported me and refused to let me hide behind wealth or privilege." He stood up, and Lyric's heart stopped. Bennett knelt beside the table, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. The restaurant went quiet. "You're the most extraordinary woman I've ever met. Will you marry me?" The ring was stunning. A single ethically sourced diamond set in a platinum band. Engraved on the inside was a line from Maya Angelou: "We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through." Tears filled Lyric's eyes. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." The restaurant erupted in applause. Bennett slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, and Lyric felt something she'd never felt before. Chosen. Finally, completely chosen. The wedding planning began immediately. They set the date for the following June at the Phipps Conservatory. Bennett wanted to invite 200 people. Lyric negotiated down to 120. She insisted on paying for half. He insisted on paying for all of it, but compromised at 60-40. Everything felt right. Everything felt real. Lyric should have known that when something feels too perfect, it usually is. Diane Hayes had always been beautiful, and she'd always known exactly how to use it. At 56, she still turned heads when she walked into a room. Her skin was smooth dark velvet, her curves deliberate, her smile practiced to perfection. She'd spent decades learning how to make men stupid with want, how to open doors with a look, how to get things without ever asking directly. What Diane had never learned was what to do once she had those things. How to keep a man interested after the initial fascination faded. How to build something lasting instead of something intense and temporary. So she'd cycled through relationships her entire adult life, each one leaving her more bitter, more calculating, more convinced that the problem was never her. It was them. When Lyric called to tell her about the engagement, Diane's first response was silence. "Mom, did you hear me? I'm getting married." "To the billionaire," Diane said slowly. "To Bennett." "Yes. Well," Diane's voice brightened artificially. "You really landed yourself a whale, didn't you, baby?" Lyric's stomach tightened. "I landed myself a partner. Someone I love. Love, money. When you have both, who cares which came first?" The comment sat in Lyric's chest like a stone, but she pushed it away. Her mother had always been cynical about relationships. That was Diane's damage, Diane's story. It didn't have to be hers. The first meeting between Bennett and Diane happened over dinner at a steakhouse in Shadyside. Diane wore a dress that was just slightly too tight, too low cut for a family dinner. She laughed too loud at Bennett's jokes. Her hand lingered on his arm when she talked, and Lyric saw something flicker in her mother's eyes when she looked at Bennett. Assessment, calculation, hunger. "He's handsome," Diane said later, after Bennett excused himself to take a call. "And generous, I bet." "He's kind," Lyric corrected. "Even better." Diane sipped her wine. "You've done well for yourself, baby. Real well." The compliment felt wrong, like it was about Bennett's bank account rather than Lyric's happiness. But Bennett, generous to a fault, saw Diane as someone to help rather than someone to be wary of. When he learned about her credit card debt, $47,000 accumulated through years of bad decisions and worse relationships, he paid it off without being asked. "Bennett, that's too much," Lyric had protested. "She's going to be my family too," he'd said, kissing her forehead. "Family takes care of family." He helped Diane move to a better apartment in Lawrenceville, paying the first 6 months of rent. He gave her a job doing administrative work for one of his non-profits, $60,000 a year for what amounted to part-time work. "You don't have to do all this," Lyric said, watching her mother's life transform in ways Lyric's hard work had never been able to accomplish. "I want to," Bennett insisted. "She raised an incredible daughter. That deserves recognition." If only he'd stopped at recognition instead of moving towards something else entirely. Diane became increasingly involved in the wedding planning. Suddenly, this woman who'd missed dance recitals, high school graduation, and countless Birthdays had opinions about floral arrangements, seating charts, and dress styles. "I just want to be part of this, baby," Diane said, when Lyric gently suggested she might be overstepping. "I know I wasn't always there when you were growing up. Let me be here now." Lyric, who'd spent a lifetime hoping for her mother's attention, gave in. She didn't see the way Diane's eyes followed Bennett when he left a room. She didn't notice the text messages that made her mother smile in that particular way. She didn't catch the moment at the dress fitting when Diane whispered something to Bennett that made him blush and look away. Or maybe she did notice, and she pushed it down the way she'd pushed down every uncomfortable truth about her mother for 32 years. 3 weeks before the wedding, Lyric's instincts started screaming. But by then, it was already too late. The affair had been going on for 3 months, in her apartment, in her bed, while she addressed invitations and confirmed catering and believed, with her whole heart, that she was finally building the life she deserved. Bennett and Diane thought they were being careful. They thought she'd never find out. They were wrong about that, too. Lyric wanted to believe her mother had finally shown up for her. She wanted to believe Bennett was just being kind. But 3 weeks before the wedding, the signs became impossible to ignore. And what Lyric discovered would transform her from a trusting bride into a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to expose. 3 weeks before the wedding, Lyric stopped by Bennett's downtown office with lunch. It was a Tuesday, the kind of spontaneous gesture that couples in love did, surprising each other with salads from that place he liked, stealing 30 minutes in the middle of a busy workday. She walked through the gleaming lobby of Cross Industries, smiled at the receptionist, who knew her by name, and rode the elevator to the executive floor. The doors opened just as someone was stepping out. Diane. Her mother froze, guilt flashing across her face before she smoothed it into surprise. "Baby, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing." Lyric held up the bag of food, bringing Bennett lunch. "Oh, how sweet." Diane's laugh sounded wrong. Too high, too quick. "I was just leaving. Bennett was helping me understand some paperwork for the non-profit job. Boring tax stuff. Why didn't you call me?" "I could have explained it. You're so busy with the wedding planning. I didn't want to bother you." Diane kissed Lyric's cheek, her perfume overwhelming in the small elevator space. "I'll call you later, okay?" She was gone before Lyric could ask anything else. Bennett was in his office, behind his massive desk, looking at his computer screen. He glanced up when Lyric entered, and for just a fraction of a second, something crossed his face. Anxiety? Guilt? "Hey, this is a nice surprise." He stood, came around the desk, kissed her. His lips were warm, familiar, lying lips, though she didn't know it yet. "I just saw my mom leaving. She said you were helping her with paperwork." "Yeah, some W-2 stuff for the foundation job. Nothing major." He took the lunch bag from her hands. "You're the best. I'm starving." They ate together, talked about the wedding, the final head count, the string quartet they'd hired, whether they should do a first dance or skip it. Normal couple conversation, but something felt off, like a note played slightly out of tune. That night, Lyric did something she'd never done in their entire relationship. She waited until Bennett was in the shower, grabbed his phone from the nightstand, and opened his messages. Her hands shook as she scrolled through his texts. Most were work, related, boring exchanges about meetings and contracts. She was about to put the phone back, feeling guilty for even looking, when she saw the message preview notifications. From Diane. Delete this. From Diane. When can I see you again? From Diane. Stop making me laugh when she's around. I can't hide it. Lyric's vision blurred. She clicked on the conversation thread, but Bennett's side was empty, all his messages deleted. Only Diane's responses remained, little ghosts of a conversation Lyric was never supposed to see. From Diane. I know this is wrong, but I can't stop thinking about you. From Diane. Same hotel as last time, room 447. From Diane. She's at that tasting with the caterer until 8. We have time. The phone nearly slipped from Lyric's trembling hands. She took screenshots, her fingers moving on autopilot, and texted them to herself. Deleted the texts she'd sent. Put Bennett's phone back exactly where she'd found it. When he came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, water still. Dripping from his hair, Lyric was in bed pretending to read a book. "You okay?" he asked. "You're quiet." "Just tired." "Long day." He kissed the top of her head, got into bed beside her, and fell asleep within minutes. The sleep of someone with a clear conscience. Or someone who thought he'd covered his tracks well enough. Lyric stared at the ceiling until dawn. She could have confronted him right there. Could have screamed, thrown things, demanded the truth. But years of surviving had taught her something crucial. Emotion without strategy was just noise. If she confronted him now, with only text message previews as evidence, he'd deny it. He'd gaslight her, make her feel crazy for snooping, turn it around until somehow she was apologizing to him. No. If this was what she thought it was, what she knew it was, she needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. And she needed to be smart about what she did with it. The next morning, Lyric called in sick to work and hired a private investigator. Rhonda James worked out of a small office in Bloomfield, above a pizza shop. She was 50-something, stocky, with grey hair cut short and eyes that had seen every kind of human betrayal. "How long do you think it's been going on?" Rhonda asked after Lyric explained the situation. "I don't know. Weeks? Months?" "And you want photo evidence, timestamps, locations, the full documentation?" "Everything," Lyric said. "I need to know everywhere they go, every time they meet, video if possible. And I need it before my wedding day." "When's the wedding?" 3 weeks. Rhonda whistled low. "That's tight, but doable. This is going to run you about $10,000, maybe more, depending on how often they're meeting." Lyric didn't hesitate. "Do it." The manila folder arrived at Lyric's office 1 week later. Rhonda handed it to her personally, her expression sympathetic. "I'm sorry," the investigator said. "It's all in there. You might want to sit down before you look." Lyric waited until she was alone in her office, door locked, before she opened the folder. The first photo showed Bennett and Diane entering the Fairmont Hotel downtown. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday, the same Thursday Lyric had been meeting with the florist about centerpieces. The second photo showed them leaving 3 hours later. There were dozens of photos. Different hotels, different days, all in the middle of afternoons when Lyric was busy with work or wedding planning. Credit card statements showed charges Lyric hadn't known about, an apartment rental in Shadyside, her own neighborhood. Bennett had been renting a place 5 blocks from where she lived. A statement from the doorman at that apartment building. "Yes, Mr. Cross has been coming here twice a week for about 3 months, usually with an older black woman. I assumed she was his. I don't know, I didn't ask questions. 3 months. The affair had been going on for 3 months. The folder weighed nothing, just paper and ink. But holding it, Lyric felt like she was carrying 1,000 pounds of grief. She allowed herself 5 minutes to cry at her desk. 5 minutes of raw, ugly sobbing into her hands. 5 minutes to feel the devastation of being betrayed by the man she loved and the woman who gave birth to her. When the 5 minutes were up, she wiped her face, reapplied her makeup, and got to work. Because Lyric hadn't just hired Rhonda to investigate the affair, she'd hired her to investigate Bennett. The second folder contained something even more valuable, the business deal that would make destroying Bennett so much sweeter. Cross Industries was positioning itself to merge with Euro Energy Alliance, a major European renewable energy consortium. The deal was worth $2.3 billion and was scheduled to be announced the Monday after the wedding. But the merger was contingent on Bennett's image, the conscious billionaire, the one who married across racial lines, who supported community causes, who was different from the rest of the wealthy elite. The European investors had done their due diligence. They wanted a partner who was stable, ethical, forward-thinking. The wedding wasn't just personal for Bennett, it was professional. It was branding. Lyric was a prop in his performance of being a good man. That realization transformed her grief into something harder, sharper, cleaner, rage with purpose. Lyric spent the next week becoming someone she barely recognized. Someone calculating. Someone cold. Someone who smiled at her fiancé's lies and her mother's face, and planned their destruction with the precision of an architect. She went to the rehearsal dinner and laughed at Richard Cross's jokes. She posed for the pre-wedding photos that Pittsburgh magazine wanted. She confirmed final details with the caterer, the florist, the string quartet. She played the role of blissful bride so convincingly that no one suspected the fury crystallizing in her chest. But while she smiled in public, in private, she was building her trap. She hired 2 security guards, off-duty police officers who moonlighted for private events and gave them specific instructions for the wedding day. She positioned them to block certain exits. She briefed them on who might try to leave. She bought a small camera disguised as a pen and a separate audio recorder that could fit in her pocket. She tested both devices repeatedly until she was certain they'd capture everything she needed. She contacted the AV company handling the wedding ceremony and requested a change. Instead of just displaying the ceremony for guests in the back, she wanted the screen to accept HDMI input. For a surprise video montage, she told them. She prepared the video files, edited, organized, ready to play at the press of a button. While digging through Bennett's finances for evidence of the affair, Lyric discovered something else. Something that had nothing to do with her mother, but everything to do with how thoroughly she could destroy Bennett's world. Trevor Mahoney, Bennett's business partner and friend since Yale, had been embezzling from Cross Industries for 2 years. The scheme was sophisticated. Shell companies, offshore accounts, carefully disguised transfers. Trevor had stolen $3.2 million, and Bennett hadn't noticed. Because he'd been too distracted playing house with 2 women who shared DNA. Lyric compiled all the evidence, bank records, corporate filings, transaction histories. She put it in a folder marked for Richard Cross, Bennett's father. She called Klaus Werner, the CEO of Euro Energy Alliance, using a burner phone and an anonymous email account. She sent him preliminary evidence of Bennett's affair, his misuse of foundation funds, because the apartment he'd rented for Diane had been paid for, through the Cross Foundation's discretionary account, which was fraud, and a simple message: "Is this the kind of partner you want representing your brand?" She filed reports with the IRS and the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office, documenting the foundation's financial irregularities. She made sure those reports wouldn't be processed until after the wedding, but that they were officially on record. She contacted the FBI with the evidence of Trevor's embezzlement. An agent named Sarah Chen told her they'd been looking into Cross Industries for other reasons, and this information was extremely valuable. "We'll need to bring him in for questioning. When would be a good time?" "Saturday," Lyric said. "Around 4 p.m. There's an event where he'll definitely be in attendance." She had restraining orders prepared against both Bennett and Diane, ready to be filed the moment she needed them. The only person she brought into her confidence was Zara, her best friend since college. Zara had been there through every bad relationship, every struggle, every triumph. She deserved to know. They sat in Zara's living room on a Wednesday night, 1 week before the wedding. Lyric spread all the evidence across the coffee table, photos, documents, timelines. "Oh my God," Zara whispered, staring at the images of Bennett and Diane. "Oh my God, Lyric, what are you going to do?" "Something they'll never forget." "You're still going through with the wedding?" "I'm going through with the ceremony. What happens during it is going to be very different from what they're expecting." Lyric explained her plan. All of it. The video, the exposure, the business consequences, the legal ramifications. Zara was quiet for a long moment. This is nuclear." "They deserve nuclear. I know. I just want to make sure you're ready for the fallout. This isn't just revenge. This is scorched earth." "Good," Lyric said. "I want them to know exactly what it costs to betray me." On Friday afternoon, the day before the wedding, Lyric had one final performance to give. She went with Diane to get pedicures, a mother-daughter bonding activity that now felt obscene. They sat in adjacent massage chairs while 2 technicians worked on their feet. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Diane asked, her voice casual. "I've never been happier," Lyric said, looking her mother directly in the eye. Everything is absolutely perfect. Diane shifted uncomfortably. Baby, I need to tell you something. For a moment, Lyric thought her mother might actually confess, might actually show some shred of conscience. I'm so proud of you, Diane said instead. You've done so well for yourself. Bennett is lucky to have you. The irony was suffocating. Thanks, Mom, and thank you for being here, for being part of this. Lyric's smile was perfect, practiced. I couldn't do this without you. I love you, baby. I know exactly what you love, Lyric said. Diane didn't catch the double meaning. Friday afternoon arrived with the weight of inevitability. Lyric had told Bennett she had a final fitting for her dress and would be busy all afternoon. She'd told Diane the same thing. What she actually did was go to her apartment at exactly the time she knew they'd be there. Margot, Bennett's sister, had called her that morning, completely innocent, unknowing, asking if Bennett had left his cufflinks at Lyric's place. He needs them for tomorrow, and he's freaking out. I'll check, Lyric had said. I'm heading there now anyway. The camera pen was in her purse, already recording. The audio device was in her jacket pocket. She unlocked her apartment door quietly. The living room was empty, but she could hear sounds from the bedroom. Music, playing softly, other sounds that made her stomach turn. Lyric walked to her bedroom door and opened it. Bennett and Diane were in her bed. Tangled in sheets, Lyric had washed herself just 3 days ago. They didn't hear her at first, just 3 days ago. They didn't hear her at first, too caught up in each other to notice. Lyric let the camera capture everything for 5 long seconds. Let the audio recorder pick up their voices, their breathing, the undeniable evidence. She gasped, loud, theatrical. They sprang apart. Bennett scrambled for his clothes. Diane pulled the sheet up to cover herself. Their faces were identical masks of horror. Lyric, Bennett started. Oh my God. Lyric's voice broke perfectly, tears already streaming down her face. Oh my God. She stumbled backward, hand over her mouth, letting them see her devastation, letting them think she was destroyed. Bennett jumped out of bed, pulling on his pants. Lyric, please, I can explain. How long? The question came out as a whisper. Baby, please. Diane reached for her. How long? Lyric screamed it this time. Silence. Terrible, confirming silence. 3 months, Diane finally admitted, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. The wedding. Lyric's voice was hollow now. The wedding is tomorrow. Everyone's coming. Everyone knows. What am I supposed to do? Bennett looked relieved that she was thinking practically. He probably thought she was already moving toward forgiveness, toward sweeping this under the rug to save face. We'll cancel it, he said quickly. I'll handle everything. I'll take care of the costs, notify the guests, all of it. Lyric, I'm so sorry. This was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. Was it? Lyric looked at him with devastating clarity. Was it really a mistake? Or was it a choice you made over and over for 3 months? Neither of them had an answer. I need to go. Lyric backed toward the door. I can't look at either of you right now. I need to think. Of course, Bennett said, desperate. Whatever you need, we can talk tomorrow. We'll figure this out. Will we? I love you, Lyric. I know I've destroyed your trust, but I do love you. Lyric looked at him for a long moment. If you loved me, you wouldn't have fucked my mother in my bed. She left them there, in her apartment, and drove straight to Zara's house. The tears were real when she arrived, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Zara held her on the couch, let her cry into her shoulder, whispered that everything would be okay. After 20 minutes, Lyric's sobs stopped. She sat up, wiped her face, and pulled out her laptop. What are you doing? Zara asked. Finishing this. Lyric's fingers flew across the keyboard, uploading the video she'd just recorded, preparing the final presentation. They think I'm home crying. They think they broke me. They did break something. They broke the wrong thing, Lyric said. They broke my mercy. She worked through the night, perfecting every detail. The video files were edited and ready. The evidence was organized. The emails to the European investors were scheduled to send at dawn. The FBI was confirmed for Saturday afternoon. At 3 a.m., Lyric finally closed her laptop. Everything was ready. "You should get some sleep," Zara said. "Tomorrow's going to be savage," Lyric finished. "Tomorrow's going to be savage." She slept for 4 hours and woke up with perfect clarity. No doubt, no hesitation, just cold, focused purpose. At noon on Saturday, she put on her $15,000 wedding dress. She did her makeup flawlessly. She held her bouquet, expensive white roses and orchids with a small remote control hidden among the stems. Diane came to the bridal suite to help with the final touches, her hands shaking as she fastened the tiny buttons down the back of the dress. "Lyric," her mother said quietly, "I know what you saw yesterday was unforgivable. If you want to call this off, we can. You don't have to go through with this." Lyric looked at her mother in the mirror. "You're right, Mum. What I saw was unforgivable, but I'm going through with this. I've thought about it all night, and I'm going through with it." Relief flooded Diane's face. She actually thought she was off the hook. She actually thought Lyric was going to marry Bennett anyway, pretend it never happened, play the dutiful wife who looked the other way. She had no idea. "You look beautiful, baby," Diane said. "I know." Lyric adjusted her veil. "Are you ready to go take your seat? Front row, mother of the bride." Diane smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Exactly where you need to be," Lyric said. "So everyone can see you." The Phipps Conservatory had never looked more beautiful. Sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, casting geometric patterns across the white chairs arranged in perfect rows. Exotic flowers bloomed in every corner. Orchids, birds of paradise, rare tropical plants that filled the air with subtle fragrance. A string quartet played Pachelbel's canon softly, the notes floating through the glass-enclosed space like a promise. 120 guests filled the seats, representing the intersection of wealth, power, and influence in Pittsburgh. Klaus Werner and his team from Euro Energy Alliance sat in the fifth row, having flown in from Germany specifically for this occasion. They'd wanted to meet Bennett's bride, to see the man they were about to partner with in his moment of personal triumph. Richard Cross, Bennett's father, sat in the front row on the groom's side, his expression proud. Beside him was Bennett's sister Margot, sober and smiling, wearing a lavender dress she'd chosen specifically to complement the wedding colors. Society reporters from 3 publications had positioned themselves strategically: Pittsburgh Magazine, the Post-Gazette, and a stringer. From the New York Times, who'd heard about the billionaire's wedding, to community activist and smelled a good human interest story. Bennett stood at the altar in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, his sandy hair perfectly styled. His best man and 2 groomsmen flanked him. Pastor Williams, a well-respected community leader, held his leather-bound Bible and wore his ceremonial stole. Bennett's face showed relief more than joy. He'd spent the previous night terrified that Lyric wouldn't show up, that she'd cancel everything, that his moment of weakness would cost him the merger, his reputation, everything he'd built. But she'd said she was coming. She'd said she'd thought about it and wanted to go through with the wedding. He'd taken that as forgiveness, as her decision to overlook his mistake, to move forward, to preserve what they'd built together. He had no idea that Lyric Hayes had never been interested in preservation. She was interested in destruction. The wedding march began, a gorgeous instrumental arrangement that signaled the bride's entrance. Everyone stood, turning toward the back of the conservatory. Lyric appeared at the entrance, and the collective intake of breath was audible. She was radiant. The custom wedding gown fit her perfectly, ivory silk that hugged her curves before flowing into a subtle train. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo with small white flowers woven through the curls. Her makeup was flawless: dewy skin, subtle gold on her eyelids, lips the color of rose petals. She carried a bouquet of white roses and orchids, professionally arranged. Expensive. No one could see the small remote control hidden among the stems. Lyric walked down the aisle alone. She'd insisted on it months ago during the planning. She didn't need anyone to give her away because she belonged to herself. At the time, Bennett had found it empowering, feminist, beautiful. Now, walking toward him with her head high and her eyes clear, she looked like a queen approaching an execution. She reached the altar and took her position across from Bennett. He looked at her with such relief, such gratitude, that she almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Pastor Williams smiled warmly at the assembled guests. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in this beautiful place to witness the union of Bennett Cross and Lyric Hayes in holy matrimony. His voice was rich, practiced, sincere. Marriage is a sacred commitment, built on trust, honesty, and faithfulness. It is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently and with full understanding of the promises being made. The irony of those words, trust, honesty, faithfulness, hung in the air like smoke. Pastor Williams continued, "Today, Bennett and Lyric have chosen to—" "Actually, Pastor Williams," Lyric interrupted, her voice clear and steady through her microphone. "Before we go any further, I need to say something." The pastor paused, surprised but gracious. "Of course." Lyric turned away from Bennett to face the audience. Every eye locked onto her. "Thank you all for coming today," Lyric began, her voice calm and measured. "I know you cleared your schedules, some of you traveled from out of town. And you came here expecting to witness my wedding to Bennett Cross." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Bennett's face went pale. "Lyric, what are you?" he started. She held up her hand. "You'll want to hear this too. I promise." Lyric pulled the small remote control from her bouquet. The flowers fell to the ground, forgotten. "What you're about to see," she said, pressing the button, "is footage from yesterday afternoon, Friday, June 15th, at approximately 3:30 p.m. in my bedroom. In my apartment, the massive screen behind her flickered to life. For a moment, there was just a bedroom, clearly feminine, with soft grey walls and white linens. Some guests leaned forward, confused about what they were looking at. Then two figures entered the frame, Bennett and Diane. The video had no sound. Lyric had muted it, because this wasn't about being crude, it was about being clear, but the visuals were undeniable. The screen showed them kissing, undressing, falling into bed together. High definition, unmistakable, damning. The gasp started small and built into chaos. "Oh my God, is that his mother-in-law? Turn it off!" Diane jumped to her feet in the front row, her face a mask of horror. "Lyric, please, turn it off." "Sit down, mother." Lyric's voice was ice. "You wanted to be part of this wedding so badly. You begged me to include you in the planning. Well, you're included. Now sit down and watch." The two security guards Lyric had hired moved into position, blocking the main exits. Bennett tried to step toward the tech booth to stop the video, but one of the guards stepped in front of him. "I wouldn't," the guard said quietly. The video continued playing for another 30 seconds. Enough time for every single person in that conservatory to see exactly what was happening, to understand exactly what they were witnessing. Lyric let the weight of it settle over the room like ash. When the video finally ended, the silence was deafening. "What you just watched," Lyric said, her voice cutting through the shock, "is my fiancé and my mother. This footage was recorded approximately 18 hours ago, in my bed, in my apartment on Morwood Avenue." She clicked the remote again. The screen changed to show text messages, screenshots of Diane's messages that Lyric had pulled from Bennett's phone, blown up large enough for everyone to read. "When can I see you again? Stop making me laugh when she's around. I can't hide it. Same hotel as last time? Room 447. She's at the tasting until 8. We have time. This affair," Lyric continued, "has been going on for 3 months. While I was planning this wedding, selecting flowers, addressing invitations, and believing I was building a life with someone who loved me," her voice didn't waver. She'd practiced this. She was ready. But the affair itself isn't even the most interesting part of this story. Lyric clicked the remote again. "See, when I discovered the affair, I did something useful with my rage. I investigated." The screen now showed credit card statements, hotel receipts, timestamps and locations. Bennett here didn't just have a fling with my mother. He set her up in an apartment, 5 blocks from where I live, in Shadyside. He paid 3 months of rent up front, $4,500 per month. He gave her a credit card with a $10,000 limit that she maxed out twice. He paid off her $47,000 in debt. He bought her a car. He gave her a $60,000 per year job at his foundation that required maybe 10 hours of work per week. But Lyric's smile was razor sharp. All told, Bennett has spent approximately $130,000 on my mother in the past 3 months, while telling me he loved me, while planning a future with me, while making love to me in the same bed he was using to fuck her. Someone in the crowd gasped at the profanity. Lyric didn't care. Now, some of you might be thinking, this is personal, this is private. Why are we here watching this? Lyric's gaze swept across the audience. Because Bennett Cross has built his entire public persona on being different. The conscious billionaire. The white man who puts his money where his mouth is on racial justice. The one who was marrying a black woman from the neighborhoods his company claims to serve. She let that sink in. This wedding wasn't just personal for Bennett. It was professional. It was branding. I wasn't just his fiancé. I was his proof that he was one of the good ones. Klaus Werner shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The reporters were writing furiously. Lyric clicked the remote. An email appeared on the screen from Klaus Werner to Bennett, dated that very morning at 6:47 a.m. The email read, "Mr. Cross, we have received disturbing information regarding your personal conduct and misuse of foundation resources. After careful consideration, Euro Energy Alliance has decided to withdraw from the proposed merger. We cannot in good conscience partner with someone who displays such profound moral bankruptcy. This decision is final." The crowd erupted in whispers. Bennett looked like he'd been struck. "That's right," Lyric said. "The $2.3 billion merger with Euro Energy Alliance, dead. I received this email this morning while I was getting my makeup done. I sent them evidence of the affair 3 days ago. They made their decision yesterday." She turned to look at Bennett directly. $2.3 billion, Bennett. Gone. Because you couldn't keep your hands off my mother. Bennett's face had gone from pale to grey. "Lyric, please." "I'm not done." Her voice was steel. "See, Bennett didn't just betray me personally. He committed fraud. That apartment he rented for my mother, the credit card he gave her, the cash gifts. He paid for all of it. Through the Cross Foundation's discretionary fund. That's a 501 degrees Celsius, 3 non-profit, Bennett. Using foundation money for personal expenses, especially to fund an affair, is illegal." The screen changed again, showing IRS forms and legal documents. "I filed reports with the IRS and the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office on Thursday. They're very interested in auditing the Cross Foundation's finances. I have a feeling they're going to find some other interesting discrepancies too." Richard Cross stood up, his face purple with rage. "This is slander. You can't—" "It's not slander if it's true, Mr. Cross. And I have documentation for everything." Lyric's smile widened. "Which brings me to my mother." She turned to look at Diane, who was crying silently in the front row, mascara streaking down her face. "Mom, you wanted Bennett's money so badly. You competed with your own daughter for a man you didn't even love. Well, congratulations. You're going to need every penny you can get, because I'm suing you for emotional distress, intentional infliction of emotional harm, and alienation of affection." Diane's head snapped up. "You can't sue your own mother. Watch me. My lawyers filed the paperwork on Friday. You're being served on Monday." Lyric's voice was flat. "And I'm going to win. And I'm going to take every single thing you have, including every gift Bennett gave you. The car? Mine. The money he gave you. I want it back with interest. That $60,000 per year job. Consider yourself fired." One of the security guards approached Diane and Bennett, holding 2 manila envelopes. "These," Lyric said, "are restraining orders. Against both of you. You are not to contact me. You are not to come near me. You are not to speak about me to the press without my explicit written permission. If you violate these orders, you will be arrested. The guards handed the envelopes to Bennett and Diane. Neither of them took them willingly. The documents were simply placed in their laps. The conservatory had descended into complete chaos. People were standing, talking over each other, phones out recording everything. The reporters were practically vibrating with excitement. But Lyric wasn't finished. Oh, and one more thing. She looked across the crowd to where Trevor Mahoney sat, Bennett's business partner, looking smug and uninvolved. Bennett, you might want to have a conversation with your friend Trevor. Trevor's expression changed instantly. The smugness evaporated. See, while I was investigating you, I found something interesting about Trevor here. Lyric pulled out a physical folder. She'd been holding it the entire time behind her bouquet. She walked over to where Richard Cross stood and handed it to him. Mr. Cross, this is for you. Full documentation showing that Trevor Mahoney has been embezzling from Cross Industries for the past 2 years. Approximately $3.2 million funneled through shell companies and offshore accounts, bank records, transaction histories, corporate filings. It's all in there. Richard opened the folder with shaking hands. His face went from purple to white as he scanned the first page. Trevor stood up. That's ridiculous. Bennett, tell them. I already told someone, Lyric interrupted. I called the FBI on Thursday. They were very interested in the information. In fact, she checked her watch. They should be arriving right about now. As if on cue, 3 people in FBI windbreakers entered the conservatory. Special Agent Sarah Chen approached Trevor directly. Trevor Mahoney, I'm Special Agent Chen. We need you to come with us for questioning regarding financial crimes. This is insane. Trevor looked at Bennett desperately. Bennett, do something. But Bennett wasn't looking at Trevor. He was staring at Lyric like he'd never seen her before. The agents escorted Trevor out of the conservatory. The guests were on their feet now, phones recording, chaos building. Lyric walked back to the center of the space, commanding attention one final time. So, to answer what I'm sure you're all wondering, she said, her voice rising above. The noise, what did I do after I found my mother in bed with my billionaire fiancé? She paused, letting the question hang. I made sure the whole world knew exactly who they are. I made sure their betrayal cost them everything it should cost. I made sure I got justice, not just closure. And I did it in front of everyone who needed to see that when someone tries to break you, you don't just walk away quietly. Her eyes swept across the crowd, landing on each reporter, each investor, each person who would carry this story forward. You break their whole world right back. Lyric unpinned the microphone from her dress and dropped it. The sound of it hitting the marble floor echoed through the conservatory. She walked down the aisle, head high, back straight, bouquet forgotten on the ground behind her. The guests parted for her like the Red Sea. Bennett tried to follow her. Lyric, wait, please. The security guard stepped in front of him. Sir, I need you to respect the restraining order. That means no contact. Diane was sobbing uncontrollably. Richard Cross was reading through the Trevor documents, his face ashen. Margot stood frozen, unsure whether to chase after her brother or let him face what he'd created. The reporters were already on their phones, calling editors, uploading photos, crafting headlines. Lyric pushed through the conservatory doors and out into the June sunshine. Zara was waiting in the parking lot, engine running, exactly where she'd promised to be. Lyric got into the passenger seat, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Girl, Zara finally said, her voice filled with awe. That was the most savage thing I have ever witnessed in my entire life. It needed to be, Lyric said simply. Where to? Airport. I have a flight to Ghana in 3 hours. 3 weeks, right? By yourself? By myself. Lyric leaned back against the headrest. I need to be somewhere no one knows me, knows this story, knows anything except that I'm a woman who needs some peace. Zara pulled out of the parking lot. Behind them, the conservatory was still in chaos, guests streaming out, reporters clustering together, security trying to maintain order. What about the lawsuit money? Zara asked. When you win against your mum. A slow smile spread across Lyric's face. Every single penny is going to a non-profit I'm starting, for daughters of narcissistic mothers, women whose own mothers competed with them, hurt them, chose men over them. What are you calling it? The Diane Hayes Memorial Fund for women she couldn't break. Zara nearly drove off the road. You are absolutely unhinged, and I love you. My mother taught me how to be ruthless, Lyric said, watching Pittsburgh disappear in the side mirror. She just didn't expect me to be better at it than her. Are you screaming right now? Drop a comment and tell us what you would have done. Hit that subscribe button because you know you need more stories like this. Share this with someone who needs to see what real consequences look like when you refuse to stay silent about betrayal. By Sunday morning, Lyric Hayes was 35,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, her phone in airplane mode, completely disconnected from the chaos she'd left behind. But the chaos was very real, and it was growing by the hour. The video of the wedding that wasn't had been uploaded to social media by at least 30 different guests. Within 6 hours, it had been viewed 12 million times. By Sunday morning, that number had climbed to 47 million. By Monday afternoon, it would surpass 100 million. Savage Wedding was trending on every platform. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Everyone had an opinion about what Lyric Hayes had done at the Phipps Conservatory. CNN ran a segment titled Public Shaming or Justified Justice, with a panel of relationship experts debating whether Lyric's exposure was empowerment or cruelty. The BBC covered it as an American cultural phenomenon, the intersection of betrayal, wealth, and social media vindication. TMZ got exclusive photos of Bennett leaving his penthouse in sunglasses and a baseball cap, trying to avoid photographers. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette ran a front-page story, Billionaire's Wedding Becomes Courtroom as Bride Exposes Affair. The New York Times published an opinion piece by a feminist scholar, arguing that Lyric's actions represented a new model of female rage, strategic, public, and unapologetic. Of course, there were those who condemned her. Conservative commentators called her vindictive, cruel, attention-seeking. A few think pieces questioned whether public humiliation was ever justified, whether she'd gone too far, whether forgiveness would have been the higher road. Lyric, somewhere over the ocean with headphones in and a glass of wine in her hand, didn't care about any of it. While she slept on the plane, Bennett Cross's world was collapsing in real time. The Cross Industries Board held an emergency meeting on Sunday evening. The vote was unanimous. Bennett Cross was removed as CEO effective immediately. His father, Richard, who'd founded the company 40 years earlier and reluctantly handed it to his son 5 years ago, took back control. The board has determined that Bennett's personal conduct and professional judgment have become liabilities to this organization, Richard said in a terse press statement. We are committed to restoring integrity to Cross Industries. The professional consequences compounded quickly. 3 of Bennett's business partners filed lawsuits, claiming his scandal had damaged their reputations by association. The board of the Cross Foundation voted to remove him as director and launched an internal audit of the finances. That audit, combined with the IRS investigation Lyric had triggered, revealed that Bennett's misuse of foundation funds went far beyond the apartment he'd rented for Diane. Over the past 3 years, he'd spent nearly $800,000 in foundation money on personal expenses, luxury travel disguised as donor meetings, a boat registered as educational equipment, consulting fees paid to friends who did no actual work. The IRS filed criminal charges, fraud, tax evasion, misuse of non-profit resources. Bennett's lawyers estimated he was looking at potential prison time, anywhere from 2 to 5 years if convicted. The European merger that had promised $2.3 billion was dead and buried. Euro Energy Alliance released a statement making it clear they wanted nothing to do with Bennett Cross or his companies. The loss of that deal sent Cross Industries' stock price plummeting by 37% in 1 week. Legal fees began piling up. Bennett hired a team of attorneys to defend against the criminal charges, the civil lawsuits, the board actions, and Lyric's restraining order. The retainer alone was $2 million. Over the next year, His legal costs would balloon to nearly $50 million. He became a pariah overnight. Invitations to charity galas were quietly rescinded. His name was removed from donor walls at museums and universities. Former friends stopped returning his calls. The Pittsburgh social scene that had once celebrated him now treated him like a contagion. Bennett Cross, the man who'd built his image as the conscious billionaire, was now a cautionary tale about hypocrisy and hubris. Diane Hayes's destruction was quieter, but no less complete. Lyric's lawyers moved quickly. They froze Diane's bank accounts, seized the car Bennett had bought her, and filed paperwork to reclaim the apartment deposit and 3 months of rent. The $60,000 per year job at the Cross Foundation disappeared the moment Bennett was removed from the board. The lawsuit for emotional distress moved through the courts faster than Diane's underfunded legal aid attorney could manage. Diane had no real defense. The affair was documented, the betrayal was clear, and Pennsylvania law allowed for alienation of affection claims in specific circumstances. The case settled out of court for $500,000. Every penny Diane had managed to save over her lifetime, plus the liquefied value of everything Bennett had given her. Diane filed for bankruptcy 2 weeks later. The shame was worse than the financial ruin. Everyone in Pittsburgh knew who she was now, the mother who'd slept with her daughter's fiancé. Neighbors whispered when she walked by. Former friends blocked her number. The looks she got at the grocery store were enough to make her want to disappear. So she did. Diane moved to Houston to live with a cousin she barely knew, leaving Pittsburgh in the middle of the night like a fugitive. She didn't tell Lyric she was leaving. She didn't say goodbye. Lyric wouldn't have answered anyway. Trevor Mahoney, Bennett's business partner and college friend, faced his own reckoning. The FBI's investigation moved swiftly once they had Lyric's documentation. Trevor was arrested, charged with embezzlement, wire fraud, and money laundering. His trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before finding him guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay full restitution, $3.2 million plus penalties. Trevor's wife filed for divorce before he'd spent a month behind bars. And Lyric. While Bennett lost billions, Diane lost everything, and Trevor lost his freedom. Lyric Hayes became something unexpected, a folk hero. Women's groups celebrated her as a symbol of refusing victimhood. She was invited to speak at conferences, appear on podcasts, give interviews to major news outlets. Her business, Authentic Voice, saw a 300% increase in inquiries within 2 weeks. Companies wanted to work with the woman who demanded accountability. Book agents called, offering 6-figure advances for her memoir. Streaming services wanted to option her story for a limited series. Speaking bureaus offered her $25,000 per appearance to share her experience. But Lyric was in Ghana, unreachable and uninterested in capitalizing on her pain. Not yet, anyway. What she was interested in was freedom. Real freedom. Not just from Bennett and Diane, but from the weight of carrying other people's betrayals, from the exhaustion of protecting people who'd never protected her, from the belief that staying quiet was the same as being strong. For the first time in her life, Lyric Hayes felt light. Lyric landed in Accra on a Monday morning, the sun already blazing hot at 9 a.m. The air was thick with humidity, the sounds of traffic and street vendors, creating a symphony completely different from Pittsburgh's quiet streets. She checked into a small guest house in OSU, run by a Ghanaian woman named Amma, who asked no questions and offered fresh fruit with breakfast. Lyric spent the first 2 days doing nothing but sleeping, 16 hours at a time, her body finally releasing the tension it had held for months. On the 3rd day, she hired a driver to take her to Cape Coast Castle. The castle sat on the edge of the Atlantic, beautiful and terrible at once. White, walls gleaming in the sun, built on the foundation of unspeakable horror. Lyric walked through the dungeons where enslaved Africans had been held before being shipped across the ocean. She stood in front of the door of no return, where countless people had walked toward ships and away from everything they'd ever known. She wept there, not just for them, but for herself, for every ancestor who'd survived what should have killed them. for the resilience in her blood that had allowed her to survive betrayal and come out standing. An elderly tour guide named Kwame saw her crying and approached quietly. "You feel them, don't you? The ones who came before?" "Yes," Lyric whispered. "They survived so you could be here, so you could be strong." He touched her shoulder gently. "Whatever you're carrying, you come from people who carried worse and kept walking. You'll keep walking too." Lyric left the castle feeling different, not lighter exactly, but more connected to something larger than her own pain. She spent her days exploring Accra. She ate jollof rice so perfectly seasoned it made her close her eyes with pleasure. She tried kelewel from a street vendor, fried plantains with ginger and pepper that burned her tongue in the best way. She learned to eat banku and okra stew, using her hands the way the locals did. She went to a salon in Osu and sat for 6 hours while a woman named Akua braided her hair. Akua talked the entire time about her children, her husband, her grandmother who'd raised her. "My grandmother used to say that a woman's strength is not in never falling down," Akua said, her fingers moving quickly through Lyric's hair. "It's in getting back up with her head higher than before." "Did your grandmother ever fall?" Lyric asked. "Many times. Her husband left her with 5 children. She sold fabric in the market for 30 years. She survived a coup, a famine, and 2 of her children dying young." Akua's hands paused for a moment. But she never let bitterness make her small. She stayed big. Big laugh, big heart, big presence. "That's what I learned from her." Lyric thought about that for a long time, about staying big instead of letting pain make her small. She went dancing at a nightclub in Osu, surrounded by people who had no idea who she was. She danced to Afrobeats until her feet hurt and her dress stuck to her skin with sweat. A man asked her name, and she just smiled and kept dancing. She didn't owe anyone her story. She spent 3 days at a beach in Kokrobite, staying in a small hut with a thatched roof and no Wi-Fi. She swam in the Atlantic Ocean, letting the same water that had carried her ancestors wash over her, cleanse her, remind her that she was part of something ancient and enduring. She journaled every night, pages and pages of processing what had happened, what she'd done, how she felt about all of it. Some nights she cried. Some nights she laughed at the absurdity of her mother and Bennett thinking they'd get away with it. Some nights she felt nothing at all, just blank emptiness that she was learning to sit with instead of fill. She was learning to be alone without being lonely, to sit with herself, her anger, her grief, her vindication, her uncertainty about what came next, without needing to perform or explain or justify. Ghana gave her something Pittsburgh never had: anonymity. Here, she was just another black woman from America, visiting the motherland, seeking something she couldn't name. No one recognized her. No one asked about the wedding. No one wanted anything from her, except maybe to buy some fabric or try some street food or take a tour. It was the most peace Lyric had felt in years. On her last night in Accra, she sat on the balcony of her guest house with a glass of wine and finally turned on her phone. Hundreds of notifications flooded in: texts, emails, voicemails, social media mentions. She ignored all of them except one text from Zara: "Pennett's broke and your mom's gone to Texas. The non-profit paperwork is filed. The world knows what they did. You won. Come home when you're ready." Lyric smiled and turned the phone back off. She'd come home, but on her terms, in her time, as a woman who'd burned down what needed burning and was ready to build something new. Lyric returned to Pittsburgh 3 weeks after she'd left it, stepping off the plane at Pittsburgh International Airport with braids down her back and clarity in her bones. She was different, not healed completely. She understood now that healing wasn't linear, wasn't a destination you arrived at and then stayed forever. It was a practice, a daily choice, a series of small decisions to keep moving forward, even when the past pulled at you. But she was changed, fundamentally, irreversibly changed. She understood the difference between revenge and recovery. Revenge was what she'd done at the conservatory, necessary, justified, satisfying in the moment. But recovery was what she was doing now: therapy, boundaries, building a life that didn't center the people who'd hurt her. She understood the difference between justice and joy. Justice was holding Bennett and Diane accountable, making sure their actions had real consequences. Joy was what she was choosing now, to not let their betrayal steal her capacity for happiness, connection, hope. She hired Dr. Imani Okafor, a black woman therapist who specialized in complex trauma and family estrangement. They met twice a week, unpacking not just the affair but the lifetime of abandonment and competition with her mother that had preceded it. "Your mother's betrayal wasn't the beginning," Dr. Okafor said in their third session. "It was the culmination. This is who she's always been. You're just finally allowing yourself to see it clearly." That clarity was both painful and liberating. Lyric threw herself into rebuilding. She hired 3 new employees for authentic voice to handle the influx of clients. She started the non-profit she'd promised, the Diane Hayes Memorial Fund for Women She Couldn't Break, specifically to support daughters of narcissistic mothers through therapy, legal advocacy, and community support. She declined most of the media requests, but accepted a few strategic appearances where she could control the narrative. She spoke about accountability, about refusing to carry shame that belonged to someone else, about the difference between forgiveness and allowing people to escape consequences. She was careful not to say she regretted what she'd done because she didn't, but she was also clear that the public exposure hadn't healed her. It had given her justice, but healing required different work. She wasn't looking for love. After Bennett's betrayal, the thought of trusting someone again felt impossible. She was content to be alone, to focus on her business and her healing and her friendships. She told Zara over dinner one night, "I think I'm okay being single for a long time, maybe forever. I've spent so much of my life looking for love to fix what my parents broke. I'm done with that." "You say that now," Zara said, smiling. "But sometimes the right person shows up exactly when you stop looking. That's Hallmark movie logic. Doesn't mean it's not true." Lyric laughed and changed the subject. She wasn't interested in Hallmark movies or fairy tales or any narrative that suggested she needed another person to be complete. She was already whole. Scarred, yes. Changed, absolutely. But whole. And if love ever found her again, it would have to meet her at that wholeness, not promise to create it. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, Lyric sat in Dr. Imani Okafor's office, curled into the corner of a comfortable grey couch. Rain streaked the windows, and the sound created a cocoon of privacy in the small therapy room in East Liberty. Dr. Okafor, a black woman in her 50s with silver locks and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, sat across from her with a notebook balanced on her knee. They'd been meeting twice a week since Lyric returned from Ghana, peeling back layers of trauma that went far deeper than Bennett's betrayal. "The question I keep getting asked," Lyric said, staring at her hands, "is whether I regret it. The exposure, the public humiliation, going nuclear. What do you tell them?" "That I don't regret it, not even a little." Lyric looked up. "But I think people want me to say I do. Like, regret would prove I'm not a monster." "Do you think you're a monster?" "No. I think I'm a woman who refused to be quiet about being hurt." Lyric's voice was firm. "But some people say I was cruel, that I went too far, that forgiveness would have been more mature." Dr. Okafor leaned forward slightly. "What do you say to that?" "That some people value civility over justice. They want women to be quiet about their pain, to protect the people who hurt them, to take some imaginary high road, even when others are taking everything from them." Lyric's hands clenched into fists, then relaxed. "The high road is great if both people are walking it, but when someone pushes you off a cliff, sometimes you need to make sure they fall too." That's a powerful metaphor. It's the truth. Lyric's eyes were clear, certain. "Bennett and my mother didn't just hurt me once. They chose to hurt me repeatedly for 3 months. They lied to my face every single day. They had sex in my bed, in my home, while I addressed wedding invitations. That wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern of choices." Dr. Okafor nodded, writing something in her notebook. "You've been very clear about not regretting the consequences you set in motion. But I'm curious, do you think the public exposure healed you?" Lyric was quiet for a long moment. "No. That's the thing people don't understand. Revenge was necessary for justice, but it didn't heal me. It gave me satisfaction. It gave me vindication. It made sure they faced real consequences instead of just my private tears. She paused. But healing? Healing is what I'm doing here, with you. Healing is the work I'm doing to understand why my mother's betrayal hurt even more than Bennett's. Healing is learning that I can be both the woman who burned everything down and the woman who's building something new. Those aren't contradictory, Dr. Okafor said. No, they're both me, both true, both necessary. They spent the rest of the session talking about Diane, not the affair, but the lifetime of abandonment that preceded it, the missed recitals and graduations, the men who always came before Lyric's needs, the competition disguised as motherhood. Your mother taught you that love was conditional and scarce, Dr. Okafor said near the end of their session, that you had to compete for it, earn it, and even then it could be taken away at any moment. Bennett's betrayal confirmed that belief. But here's the work, learning that what your mother and Bennett gave you wasn't actually love. It was performance. Real love doesn't make you compete. Lyric carried those words with her as she left the office, into the rain, toward a future she was slowly learning to build on truth instead of trauma. 1 year after the wedding, Lyric stood on a stage at the David L. Lawrence Convention Center, looking out at 2,000 women who'd paid to attend the Reclaiming Power conference. She'd been hesitant to accept the speaking invitation. She didn't want to be defined forever by one moment of public revenge, didn't want to become a cautionary tale or a one-dimensional symbol. But the organizers had been clear. They wanted her to speak about accountability, boundaries, and rebuilding, not just about the wedding. So she'd said yes. Now, standing under stage lights in a navy blue suit, her braids swept into an elegant bun, Lyric felt the weight of 2,000 pairs of eyes on her. People ask me all the time if I've forgiven them, she began, her voice steady through the microphone. My mother, my ex-fiancé, and here's my honest answer. I don't spend enough time thinking about them to maintain active forgiveness. A ripple of surprised laughter moved through the audience. I know that's not the answer you're supposed to give, Lyric continued. We're taught that forgiveness is the ultimate goal, the sign of healing, the proof that you've moved on. But I've learned something important. Forgiveness is optional, not mandatory. She let that statement settle. What happened to me wasn't a small thing. It wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a calculated, sustained betrayal by two people who were supposed to love me. And when I discovered it, I had a choice. I could handle it privately, cancel the wedding quietly, let them save face, carry the shame of their actions in silence. Or I could do what I did, expose them publicly, and make sure they faced real consequences. Some people called what I did revenge. Others called it accountability. I call it both. Lyric's voice grew stronger. Because here's the truth. Forgiveness should never be confused with allowing people to escape consequences. You can forgive someone and still sue them. You can have compassion for why someone hurt you and still tell everyone what they did. You can move on with your life and still demand justice. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. What I did was savage. I own that. But sometimes savage is the appropriate response to betrayal. Sometimes you need to show the world and yourself that you will not be diminished, silenced, or destroyed by other people's choices. Applause erupted, building into a standing ovation. Lyric waited for it to quiet before continuing. But I also want to be clear about something. That moment at the conservatory didn't heal me. It gave me justice, yes. It gave me vindication. But healing? Healing came from therapy, from sitting with a professional and unpacking why my mother's betrayal hurt even more than my fiancé's, from learning to set boundaries, from building a life that doesn't center the people who hurt me. She spoke for another 20 minutes about the difference between revenge and recovery, about how anger is information rather than a character flaw, about the importance of choosing yourself even when the world tells you to choose peace. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. During the Q&A, a young woman in the third row stood up, her voice shaking. My boyfriend cheated on me with my sister. Everyone in my family is telling me to forgive them, to keep the family together, to move on. But I'm so angry. How do I know if my anger is justified or if I'm just being bitter? Lyric looked at her with compassion. Your anger is information. It's telling you that serious boundaries were violated, that trust was broken in a profound way. What you do with that anger is up to you. Maybe your path is different from mine, but don't let anyone convince you that your anger is the problem. Their betrayal is the problem. Your anger is just the messenger. The young woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. And here's what I want you to know, Lyric added. Be nice to people who deserve it. Everyone else gets boundaries. You don't owe forgiveness to people who aren't even sorry. You don't owe peace to people who destroyed your peace. You owe yourself protection, healing, and a future that isn't built on pretending you weren't hurt. After the conference, dozens of women lined up to thank her, to share their own stories, to tell her that seeing her demand consequences had given them permission to do the same. Lyric listened to each one, gave hugs when they were wanted, and felt something shift inside her. She wasn't just the woman who'd been betrayed. She was becoming the woman who'd survived it and was helping others do the same. 14 months after the wedding that wasn't, Lyric walked into City Books in Shadyside for a book launch. Her friend Jasmine had written a memoir about growing up biracial in Pittsburgh, and Lyric had promised to show up for the reading. The bookstore was crowded, folding chairs set up in rows, a small podium at the front, the familiar smell of coffee and paper. Lyric found a seat near the back, not wanting to draw attention. She was still recognizable. The wedding video had made sure of that. But most people were polite enough not to stare. The reading was beautiful. Jasmine spoke about identity and belonging with raw honesty. During the Q&A, a white man in the third row raised his hand. You talk a lot about white people needing to do the work of understanding their privilege, he said. What does that actually look like in practice? Beyond just reading books and feeling guilty, Lyric expected the usual performative answer, the kind white people gave, when they wanted to sound woke without actually changing anything. But Jasmine smiled. I'm going to defer that question to someone more qualified. Ethan, you want to take this one? The man who stood up was in his mid-30s, tall but not imposing, with brown hair that needed a trim and glasses that had gone slightly crooked on his face. He wore jeans and a button-down shirt that had a coffee stain on the cuff. The work looks like showing up, Ethan said, his voice quiet but firm. Not just to events like this, but in moments when it costs you something. It looks like calling out your racist uncle at Thanksgiving, even though it makes dinner uncomfortable. It looks like using your privilege to advocate for people who don't have it, in hiring practices, in housing policy, in courtrooms. It looks like doing the work, even when no one's watching to applaud you for it. He sat back down, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. After the reading, Lyric approached Jasmine to congratulate her. The author pulled her into a hug. I'm so glad you came. And hey, you should meet Ethan. He does civil rights law for the Housing Justice Project. I think you two would have a lot to talk about. Before Lyric could protest, Jasmine was waving Ethan over. Up close, he was unremarkable in the best way. No expensive watch, no designer clothes, no air of wealth or importance. Just a regular person with kind eyes and a slightly nervous smile. Ethan Miller, he said, extending his hand. I know who you are. Everyone does. Lyric's guard went up immediately. Do they? Yeah. Lyric Hayes, founder of Authentic Voice. You spoke at the gentrification hearing last month and absolutely destroyed the developers' arguments. I cited your testimony in a brief I'm writing. Lyric blinked. He wasn't talking about the wedding. He was talking about her work. You were at that hearing. I represent 3 families fighting displacement in Larimer. Your data on community investment versus community displacement was exactly what I needed. He pulled out his phone, scrolling quickly. Actually, can I ask you about your methodology? I want to make sure I'm citing it correctly. They talked for 20 minutes about housing policy, community development, and the way wealth extraction destroyed neighborhoods. Ethan asked smart questions, listened carefully to her answers, and never once mentioned Bennett or viral videos or anything personal. When the bookstore started closing, Jasmine interrupted them. You two need to exchange numbers or something. This is too good a conversation to end. Ethan looked at Lyric. Would that be okay? I'd love to pick your brain about some other cases I'm working on. Sure, Lyric said, surprised by how much she meant it. They exchanged numbers. As Ethan walked to his car, a 10-year-old Subaru with a dented bumper, Jasmine elbowed Lyric. He's single, you know. I'm not looking. I didn't say you were. I'm just saying he's single, kind, and spends 60-hour weeks defending people who can't afford to pay him. You could do worse. I could also do nothing, Lyric said, which is exactly what I'm planning to do. But 3 days later, Ethan texted her an article about predatory lending practices in historically black neighborhoods with a message, thought you'd find this interesting. Also, wanted to say I saw what happened at your wedding. I know everyone has an opinion about it, but mine is this. You demanded accountability when most people would have stayed silent. That takes courage. Lyric stared at the message for a long time before responding, thank you. Most people either think I'm a hero or a villain, not a lot of middle ground. Ethan, I don't think you're either. I think you're a person who was hurt and refused to pretend you weren't. There's nothing wrong with that. They started texting occasionally, never about anything personal, just articles, ideas, cases he was working on, clients she was consulting with. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of connection that didn't demand anything. 3 months passed like that, casual texts, no pressure, no expectations, just two people who enjoyed each other's thoughts. Lyric told herself it was just friendship. She wasn't ready for anything else, and maybe she never would be. She didn't realize something was shifting until the night everything changed. 4 months after meeting Ethan, Lyric found herself at a community meeting about a proposed development in Homewood, her old neighborhood. A developer wanted to build luxury apartments on the site of an old community center, promising revitalization while ignoring the displacement it would cause. Lyric was there to speak against it, armed with data and righteous anger. Ethan was there too, though she didn't know it until he stood up during the public comment period. My name is Ethan Miller, and I represent Mrs. Dorothy Freeman, he said, gesturing to an elderly black woman in the front row. Mrs. Freeman has lived in Homewood for 63 years. She raised 4 children in the house 2 blocks from here. She buried her husband in Homewood Cemetery. She's watched this neighborhood survive disinvestment, redlining, and every policy designed to destroy it. His voice was usually quiet, measured. Now it carried the weight of conviction. And now, after 63 years of this community surviving despite systematic abandonment, you want to call luxury apartments revitalization? Ethan's gaze fixed on the developers. Revitalization for who? Not for Mrs. Freeman, not for the families who stayed when everyone else wrote this neighborhood off. You're not revitalizing anything. You're displacing the people who kept this community alive when it had nothing. He sat down to thunderous applause. Lyric watched him, something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. After the meeting, which ended with the development being tabled for further community input, Lyric found Ethan outside, talking quietly with Mrs. Freeman. The elderly woman was thanking him, patting his hand. You didn't have to do all this for me, sweetheart. I know I can't pay you what you're worth. Mrs. Freeman, you staying in your home is payment enough. Ethan's smile was genuine. Besides, justice isn't justice if it only works for people who can afford it. After Mrs. Freeman left, Lyric approached him. That was incredible, she said. Ethan looked embarrassed. I just did what needed to be done. You chose principle over profit. You stood up to money and power for someone who couldn't pay you. You actually meant all that stuff you said at Jasmine's reading about doing the work when no one's watching. Lyric studied his face. You're real, as opposed to performed. So many people perform goodness. You actually live it. They walked to a nearby coffee shop that was still open, talking about the meeting, about Homewood, about the way gentrification destroyed communities in the name of progress. Lyric found herself laughing, really laughing, at Ethan's self-deprecating story about accidentally calling a judge Your Majesty instead of Your Honor during his first trial. I was so nervous I could barely breathe, he said. The judge just looked at me and said, "Mr. Miller, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but your honor will suffice. How did you not die of embarrassment?" I almost did. My CO counsel still brings it up at every holiday party. When they left the coffee shop 2 hours later, the streets were quiet and dark. Ethan walked her to her car. "Ethan," Lyric said, her heart pounding in a way that felt terrifying and right at the same time. "Can I take you to dinner? Not as friends, as something else." He was quiet for a moment, and Lyric immediately regretted asking. "I've wanted to ask you out for months," Ethan finally said. "But I didn't want you to think I was another white guy trying to collect you as an experience, like you were a box to check on my progressive scorecard. Is that what you'd be doing?" "No." His answer was immediate. "I'd be dating a woman I genuinely admire, who happens to be black, who also happens to scare me a little because she's smarter than me and could absolutely destroy my life if I mess up." Lyric laughed. The sound surprised her, bubbling up from somewhere deep and genuine. "I probably won't destroy your life." "Probably. Good enough for me." They had dinner the following Friday at a Thai restaurant in Garfield. Ethan asked about her childhood, her journey building authentic voice, her dreams for the future. He didn't ask about Bennett. He didn't ask about the wedding. He didn't ask about the viral video or the revenge or any of the things that had defined her in the public eye. He asked about her. When he drove her home in his beat-up Subaru that smelled faintly of coffee and old case files, he walked her to her door but didn't expect to be invited in. "I had a really good time, Lyric. Thank you for giving me a chance." She kissed him before she could overthink it. Soft, careful, hopeful. "So did I," she whispered. 2 years after the wedding that wasn't, Lyric walked into a coffee shop in Shadyside. Her mind occupied with the presentation she was preparing for a new client. She didn't see Bennett until she was already in line, and by the time she did, it was too late to leave without it being obvious. He sat alone at a corner table, nursing a black coffee and staring at a laptop that looked at least 5 years old. The Bennett Cross she'd known had always used the latest technology, always. Had the newest phone, the thinnest laptop, the most expensive everything. This Bennett looked diminished. He'd aged badly. Deep lines carved his face, around his eyes, his mouth, across his forehead. His hair had gone grey at the temples and thinned on top. He wore a sweater with a frayed collar and jeans that had seen better days. The expensive watch was gone. So was the easy confidence. He looked up, as if sensing her presence, and their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them moved. Lyric felt nothing. No rage, no hurt, no satisfaction at seeing him brought low. Just a mild curiosity, the way you might feel seeing an old acquaintance you'd lost touch with years ago. She ordered her coffee and was about to leave when Bennett stood up. "Lyric." His voice was tentative. "Can we talk? Just for a minute?" Every instinct told her to say no. She owed him nothing, least of all her time. But curiosity won. She wanted to know what he'd say after 2 years of silence and consequences. "1 minute," she said. They sat at his table. Up close, he looked even worse. Exhaustion etched into every feature. "I'm sorry," Bennett said quietly. "I know that doesn't mean anything now. I know it can't undo what I did. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. What I did was unforgivable. I was selfish and weak, and I hurt you in ways I can never make right." Lyric sipped her coffee, letting him sit with his own words. "You're right," she said finally. "You can't make it right." Bennett nodded, looking down at his hands. "What you did, though, the public exposure, the financial destruction, the way you systematically dismantled my entire life, it was brutal." "It was proportional," Lyric corrected, her voice calm and clear. "You took my trust, my love, my family, and my dignity. I took your reputation and your money. Those aren't the same things, Bennett. You can rebuild money. You can reconstruct a reputation over time. I had to rebuild my ability to trust people. I had to reconstruct my understanding of love and family and what it means. When the people closest to you betray you in the worst possible way, we're not the same." He absorbed that in silence. "What are you doing now?" Lyric asked, more out of politeness than genuine interest. Consulting, small businesses mostly, nothing like before. He gestured to his worn laptop. I'm living in a one-bedroom in Bloomfield, driving a used Honda, trying to rebuild from zero, and my mother. I haven't spoken to Diane in over a year. Last I heard, she was still in Texas. Good, Lyric thought, but didn't say. I'm in therapy now, Bennett continued. Real therapy, 3 times a week, trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I sabotaged the best thing in my life for something that meant nothing. That's good, Bennett. Lyric meant it. I genuinely hope you become a better person. Not for me, don't care. But for whoever's next. They deserve better than what you gave me. There won't be a next. Not for a long time. He looked directly at her for the first time. Are you happy? Lyric thought about Ethan, waiting for her at home with dinner started and a terrible joke already prepared. She thought about her business, thriving beyond what she'd imagined. She thought about the non-profit she'd built, the women she'd helped, the life she'd constructed from the ashes of betrayal. Yes, she said simply, I really am. I'm glad. Bennett's voice was sincere. You deserve to be happy. You always did. I'm sorry I forgot that. Lyric stood, gathering her coffee and her bag. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Bennett. I hope you do the work and become someone worthy of the second chance you're trying to build. Lyric, wait. She paused. For what it's worth, you were right about everything. I was using you to build an image. I was performing goodness instead of being good. I was treating people like props in my story instead of as whole human beings. You were right to burn it all down. I know I was, Lyric said. That's why I did it. She walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. In her car, she sat for a moment, checking her feelings the way Dr. Okafor had taught her. Was there lingering anger? No. Sadness? Not really. Relief? Maybe a little. Mostly, she felt complete. That chapter of her life was finally closed. Bennett Cross was no longer a villain in her story or an obstacle to overcome. He was just a person she used to know, facing his own consequences, walking his own path. She texted Ethan, running late. Coffee took longer than expected. Love you. His response came immediately. Take your time. Dinner can wait. Love you too. Lyric smiled and started the car. She had a future to get home to, one built on truth instead of performance, on consistency, instead of intensity, on someone who'd earned her trust one small, honest moment at a time. Bennett Cross was her past, and her past no longer had any power over her present. That was the best revenge of all. 3 years after the wedding, that wasn't. Lyric Hayes stood in her bedroom, wearing a simple cream dress that cost $600 and felt like freedom. The dress came from a local designer in Lawrenceville, a black woman, who'd started her business with a loan from Lyric's non-profit. No couture label, no magazine spread, no thousands of dollars spent on fabric that would be worn once and stored forever. Just a beautiful dress that fit perfectly and made Lyric feel like herself. Outside, in the backyard of the townhouse she and Ethan had bought together, in East Liberty, 5 people gathered under string lights. It was late afternoon in May, the kind of perfect spring day where the temperature was exactly right and everything smelled like lilacs and fresh, cut grass. No reporters waited with cameras. No society guests filled seats they'd accepted out of obligation. No crystal chandeliers or exotic flowers or string quartets playing classical music. Just people who mattered. People who'd shown up during the hard times and stayed. Ethan's parents, Michael and Patricia, sat in the front row. They'd welcomed Lyric into their family with warmth that still surprised her. Sunday. Dinners without performance. Holidays without tension. Acceptance without conditions. Patricia had pulled her aside a month ago and said simply, "You make my son happier than I've ever seen him. Thank you for choosing him." Ethan's sister, Rebecca, stood near the makeshift altar they'd set up under an oak tree. She'd become Lyric's friend before becoming her future sister-in-law, bonding over books and terrible reality TV and the shared experience of learning to set boundaries with family. Zara stood at the altar too, wearing a flowing purple dress and holding a notebook. She'd gotten ordained online specifically for this occasion, spending weeks writing a ceremony. That honored who Lyric and Ethan actually were, instead of who tradition said they should be. Colleagues from Authentic Voice filled 3 rows, the team Lyric had built. People who'd worked alongside her through the scandal and the rebuilding. Women from the support group Lyric facilitated sat together, some of them crying already. Knowing what this moment meant for a woman who'd been so publicly betrayed, Mrs. Freeman, the elderly woman Ethan had defended against displacement, sat in the 2nd row, wearing her church hat and holding a handkerchief. She'd told Ethan last week that watching him marry Lyric was one of the highlights of her 65 years in Pittsburgh. The playlist Lyric and Ethan had made together played softly through a Bluetooth speaker. Lauryn Hill, John Legend, some indie folk band Ethan loved, some Afrobeats Lyric had discovered in Ghana. Music that represented both of them woven together. No wedding march, no performance. Just Lyric walking out of her house, down the back steps, across the grass toward the man who'd proven himself worthy of her trust. Ethan stood under the oak tree in a navy suit he'd owned for years, the one he wore to court when he was defending clients who mattered. He'd gotten a haircut that morning, and his glasses were crooked. They were always crooked. And when he saw Lyric, his eyes filled with tears. Not relief like Bennett's had, just joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Lyric reached him and took his hands. They were shaking slightly. "Hi," he whispered. "Hi," she whispered back. Zara smiled at them, then at the gathered guests. "We're here because Lyric and Ethan have chosen each other, not in a moment of passion or intensity, but consistently over time through honesty and effort. That's what makes this real. That's what makes this last." She spoke for a few minutes about love as choice rather than feeling, about commitment as action rather than promise. Then she nodded to Ethan. "I think you have some things to say to each other." Ethan pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, then put it back. "I wrote something, but I'm just going to say what's in my heart." He looked at Lyric, his hands still holding hers. "Lyric, you've taught me that love isn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It's about showing up. It's about being present in the small moments. When you're processing old pain, when you're building new dreams, when you're angry or scared or doubting yourself." His voice was steady, certain. "I promise to show up, every single day, to listen when you need to be heard, to give you space when you need room to breathe, to offer support when you ask for it, not when I think you should need it." Lyric's eyes filled with tears. "I promise to never make you responsible for my growth, but to grow alongside you, to do my own work, to examine my own privilege, to be better not because you demand it, but because it's right." He squeezed her hands gently. "I promise to love you as you are, not as who I think you should be or who I want you to become. You don't need me to complete you, you're already whole, but I'm honored every single day to walk beside you." Lyric wiped her eyes, took a breath, and spoke without notes. "Ethan, when we met, I wasn't looking for love. I was barely looking for friendship. I'd been hurt in ways that made me think I might never trust anyone again." Her voice was clear, strong. "But you showed me that real love doesn't demand, it offers. Real love doesn't try to save you or fix you or make you into someone easier to manage. It just shows up consistently and says, 'I see you, I value you, I choose you.'" Ethan's tears were falling freely now. "You've never tried to save me because you understood I'd already saved myself. You've never made me perform or prove myself or shrink to fit into your life. You've just shown up, every day, in the small moments that matter more than the big ones." She squeezed his hands. "I promise to keep choosing healing even when it's hard, to keep communicating even when I'm scared, to keep building this life with you, one honest day at a time. I promise to trust you with my heart because you've earned it. You've earned it by being exactly who you are." Zara pulled out 2 simple gold bands, no diamonds, no engravings, just solid circles of metal that would last. "These rings represent continuity," Zara said. "No beginning, no end. Just the choice to keep choosing each other, day after day, year after year." Lyric and Ethan slipped the rings onto each other's fingers. By the power vested in me by the internet and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Zara said, grinning, I now pronounce you married. Kiss each other already. The kiss was simple, sweet, genuine. No performance for cameras, no awareness of being watched. Just two people who loved each other, sealing a promise they intended to keep. The backyard erupted in applause and cheers. Mrs. Freeman shouted, "That's how you do it!" And everyone laughed. The reception was exactly what they'd wanted. Casual, joyful, real. They ate catered barbecue from a black-owned restaurant in Homewood. They cut a small cake from a local bakery, lemon with raspberry filling, and fed each other gently, with respect and laughter. No smashing, no performance, just sweetness. As the sun set and the string lights became the only illumination, Lyric and Ethan danced to Etta James in the center of the backyard. No regrets. Ethan whispered against her ear. About us. Never. About what happened before. Lyric thought about Bennett, about Diane, about the wedding that had broken the internet and changed her life. Also, no. I needed to go through that fire to become who I am. I needed to learn what I won't accept so I could recognize what I deserve. And what do you deserve? This. Lyric pulled back to look at him. Truth. Consistency. A partner who shows up not just in the big moments, but in the Tuesday afternoons when nothing special is happening. Real love. Not performed love. That's what you're getting, Ethan promised. Every single day. Later, as Lyric stood by the dessert table talking to Patricia, she caught Zara's eye across the yard. Her best friend raised her glass in a silent toast, and Lyric raised hers back. They were both remembering the other wedding. The conservatory, the video, the destruction. The moment Lyric had chosen justice over silence. But they were also celebrating this moment, the construction that had come after the destruction. The real thing that had been built from the ashes of the performed thing. Lyric had loved Bennett with intensity, with passion, with the kind of desperate hope that comes from wanting something to be true. She loved Ethan with peace, with certainty, with the quiet confidence that comes from something being proven over time. The first was spectacular. The second was sustainable. The first was fireworks. The second was foundation. And foundation, Lyric had learned, was what you built a life on. As the party wound down and guests began to leave with hugs and well wishes, Ethan pulled Lyric close. Ready to start the rest of our lives? I've been ready, Lyric said, kissing him softly. I've been ready since the moment you chose principle over profit, showed up without expecting applause, and loved me without needing me to be anything other than exactly who I am. They walked into their house hand in hand, leaving the lights twinkling. Behind them, moving toward a future built on truth instead of illusion. And for the first time in her life, Lyric Hayes felt completely, undeniably, peacefully certain that she was exactly where she belonged. What Lyric did was savage, brutal, unforgiving, and absolutely proportional to the harm inflicted on her. But here's what's even more powerful than that moment of public reckoning. What she did after. She healed. Through twice-weekly therapy sessions, through time spent processing ancestral trauma in Ghana, through the honest work of rebuilding her ability to trust. She built a real life with a real partner who earned her trust through consistency, not grand gestures. She transformed her pain into purpose, starting a non-profit that helps daughters of narcissistic mothers find healing and justice. She became a voice for women who refuse to stay silent about betrayal. She proved that you can be both savage and healed, both ruthless and whole, both the woman who burns everything down and the woman who builds something beautiful from the ashes. The savage moment made headlines, but the healing that came after made her whole. Both were necessary. Both were valid. Both were her choice. And that's the power every person facing betrayal possesses, the power to choose your response. Lyric chose to demand justice and pursue healing. She chose to protect herself fiercely and refuse to shrink. She chose to move forward into something better instead of staying stuck in what destroyed her. Some people called her cruel. Some said she went too far. Some insisted that forgiveness would have been more mature, more gracious, more appropriate. Those people usually benefit from other people's silence. Lyric didn't care what they thought. She was too busy building a life worth living. Here's the truth that Lyric learned and that everyone needs to hear. You don't have to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You don't have to carry shame that belongs to someone else. You don't have to forgive to be free. You don't have to stay silent to be good. You don't have to choose between being savage and being healed. You just have to choose yourself, every single time, without apology, without explanation, with your whole savage, healed, powerful heart, in the small moments and the big ones, when it's easy and when it costs you everything. Choose yourself. 3 years after the wedding, that wasn't, someone asked Lyric if she'd do it all again. The public exposure, the nuclear revenge, the savage moment that broke the internet. She said yes without hesitation. That moment wasn't about cruelty, Lyric explained. It was about clarity. It was about showing the world, and myself, that I would not be diminished, silenced, or destroyed by other people's choices. It was about writing a different ending than the one they planned for me. She paused, her voice firm and certain. And I'd do it again, every single time. Because I'm not ashamed of demanding consequences. I'm proud of becoming a woman who knows her worth and protects it fiercely. That's the real lesson. That's the truth that matters. This is Mr. Roman's Story Vault, where we tell stories that matter, stories that inspire. Stories that give you permission to choose yourself without apology. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now. We've got more stories coming that will challenge you, inspire you, and remind you of your power. Like this video if you believe in consequences, not just empty forgiveness. Share it with someone who needs to hear that their betrayal doesn't define them, their response does. And comment below, what would you have done? What's the savage moment you're proud of? What's the boundary you wish you'd set sooner? Remember this, your betrayal doesn't define you. Your response does. Until next time, this is Mr. Roman's Story Vault. Choose yourself. Demand accountability. Build something real.